Danny Martinez had never been good at talking to people. He was the kind of person who would rather sit in the corner of a room and watch others talk than join in. His hands would shake when he had to speak in front of groups, and his voice would crack at the worst times. So, when his commanding officer told him he was being sent to guard an alien queen, Danny thought it was some kind of joke. "You're kidding, right?" Danny asked, staring at the papers in his hands. The official assignment letter looked real enough, but it had to be a mistake. There are hundreds of better soldiers than me. Why would they pick me? Captain Rodriguez smiled and shook his head. Your test scores, Martinez. You speak 5 languages. You got perfect marks in alien culture studies, and you've never gotten in trouble. Not once. That's what they want for this job. Danny felt his stomach drop. He had joined the Earth Defense Force because he thought it would be quiet work on some distant space station. He never imagined he would end up on an alien planet protecting someone who could probably crush him with one hand. 3 days later, Danny found himself on a transport ship heading to Zephyros Prime. The other guards on the ship were excited and loud, talking about how amazing it would be to see the famous Queen Viroleth. Danny sat in the back, reading everything he could about Zephyrian culture and trying not to throw up from nerves. "Hey, Martinez," called out Sergeant Kim, one of the senior guards. "You look like you're going to pass out." "It's just a guard job. We stand around, look serious, and try not to bump into anything expensive." Danny nodded but didn't feel any better. He had read about Queen Viroleth online. She was 9 feet tall, had fought in 12 major wars, and ruled over 50 different planets. The articles described her as brilliant, ruthless, and beautiful in a way that made most people afraid to look directly at her dot when their ship landed at the Crystal Palace. Danny's fears got worse. The building was huge, made of some kind of blue stone that seemed to glow from the inside. Everything was twice as tall as it needed to be for humans, and the doorways were so wide that Danny felt like an ant walking through them. The other guards were given a tour of the palace, but Danny was told to report directly to the Queen's personal guard unit. He walked through endless hallways, his boots echoing on the smooth floors. Alien servants moved past him like ghosts, their strange clothes flowing behind them. Finally, he reached the royal wing. The captain of the guard, a stern woman named Lisa Hayes, looked him up and down like she was checking a piece of equipment. "You're Martinez?" she asked. "You look young." "Yes, ma'am." "I'm 23? The Queen will be here in 5 minutes. Stand over there, keep your mouth shut, and try not to look terrified. The other aliens can smell fear, and it makes them nervous." Danny took his position along the wall with 5 other guards. 2 were human, 3 were from different alien species he couldn't identify. They all looked calm and professional. Danny felt like his heart was going to beat right out of his chest. Then the doors opened, and Queen Viroleth walked in. Danny had seen pictures, but nothing had prepared him for meeting her in person. She was tall enough that she had to duck slightly. Under the doorway, and her skin was the color of deep ocean water. Her hair was white as snow and fell to her shoulders in waves. But it was her eyes that made Danny freeze in place. They were gold, like liquid metal, and when she looked at him, he felt like she could see right through him. "Your Majesty," Captain Hayes said, bowing slightly. "This is Private Martinez, your new guard." Queen Viroleth's golden eyes focused on Danny. He tried to bow like the others, but his legs felt like rubber. He managed something that was half bow, half stumble, and nearly dropped his weapon in the process. "Welcome to Zephyros Prime, Private Martinez," the Queen said. Her voice was deep and smooth, like honey mixed with thunder. "I hope you will find your service here educational." Danny opened his mouth to respond, but only a small squeaking sound came out. The Queen's eyebrows rose slightly, and he saw what might have been amusement in her golden eyes. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Thank you, Your Majesty," he finally managed to say. The Queen nodded once and moved on to other business. Danny spent the rest of the day following her around the palace, trying not to trip over his own feet. He walked behind her as she met with advisors, attended court sessions, and reviewed military reports. Every time she spoke, her voice seemed to fill the entire room. The other guards tried to be helpful, but Danny could tell they thought he was hopeless. During their first break, Sergeant Kim pulled him aside. Look, Martinez, you need to calm down. The Queen isn't going to eat you. She's actually pretty fair as rulers go. Just do your job and stay out of the way. But Danny couldn't calm down. Every time Queen Violet looked at him, he felt like a small animal being studied by a predator. She was so tall, so confident, so completely in control of everything around her. And he was just a nervous kid from Earth who had never done anything important in his life. The worst part was that he kept catching her watching him. Not in a threatening way, but like she was trying to figure something out. During the afternoon court session, he noticed her golden eyes drift to him several times. Each time he quickly looked away, his face burning red. That evening, after the Queen had retired to her private chambers, Captain Hayes called Danny into her office. "How do you think your first day went?" she asked. Danny wanted to crawl under a rock. "Not very well, ma'am, I'm sorry. I know I looked like an idiot. You looked nervous. That's normal. The Queen is impressive, but I'm going to give you some advice. She's not impressed by people who try to act tough or show off. She's met 1,000 warriors and politicians who all think they're the most important person in the room. You want to know what she respects? Honesty, people who are real." Danny nodded, but he wasn't sure what she meant. How could someone like him be real around someone like Queen Violet? "Get some rest, Martinez. Tomorrow will be easier." But Danny couldn't sleep. He lay in his small room in the guard quarters, staring at the ceiling and thinking about those golden eyes. He had never met anyone like Queen Violet. She was everything he wasn't: confident, powerful, sure of herself. And for some reason, he couldn't stop thinking about the way she had looked at him, like she was seeing something he didn't even know was there. The next morning, Danny was determined to do better. He practiced his bow in the mirror, rehearsed simple responses to common questions, and reminded himself that he was a trained soldier, not a scared child. But when Queen Violet walked into the morning briefing room, wearing a flowing blue dress that made her look like she was made of starlight, Danny felt all his preparations slip away. She was so beautiful it hurt to look at her, and so powerful that the air itself seemed to bend around her. "Good morning, Private Martinez," she said, those golden eyes focusing on him again. "I trust you slept well?" This time, Danny managed to answer without squeaking. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Thank you." She smiled, just a small curve of her lips, but it made Danny's heart skip. "Good. Today we have several important meetings. I hope you will find them interesting." As she turned away, Danny caught something in her expression that he hadn't noticed before. Behind all that power and confidence, Queen Violet looked lonely. It was just a flash, gone so quickly he might have imagined it. But for a moment, she had looked like someone who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, and had no one to share it with. Danny spent the rest of the day wondering if he had really seen that moment of vulnerability, or if it was just his imagination. Either way, something had changed. Queen Violet no longer seemed like an untouchable force of nature. She seemed like a person, complicated and real, hiding behind a mask of royal perfection, and that made her even more fascinating than before. Danny's second week at the palace was going better than his first. He had learned the daily routines, memorized the important hallways, and stopped jumping every time someone spoke to him. The other guards had started treating him like a regular member of the team instead of a nervous newcomer who might break something, but Danny still felt like he was walking on thin ice whenever Queen Violet was around. She had a way of looking at him that made him feel like she could read his thoughts. Sometimes he would catch her watching him during meetings, and he would quickly look away, his face turning red. The Queen, for her part, found Danny's reactions amusing. She had dealt with bold warriors and smooth-talking diplomats her entire life. Most people either tried to impress her or were too scared to speak at all. But Danny was different. He was clearly nervous, but he still tried to do his job well. And when he thought no one was looking, she caught him studying everything around him with genuine curiosity. The moment that changed everything happened during a formal dinner with the Andromedan Trade Federation. The palace dining hall was filled. with important aliens from across the galaxy all wearing their finest clothes and speaking in hushed, polite voices. Danny stood along the wall with the other guards, trying to blend into the background. Ambassador Crixton was the leader of the Andromedan delegation. He was a tall, lizard-like creature with green scales and cold yellow eyes. Throughout the dinner, he had been making jokes about the various species present, but his comments were getting meaner as the evening went on. "I must say, Your Majesty," Crixton said, his voice carrying across the room, "it's quite brave of you to allow humans in your palace. Such a young species, barely out of their caves. I'm surprised they can even understand our languages." Queen Viroleth's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice calm. "Humans have proven themselves to be quick learners, Ambassador. They have adapted to space travel remarkably fast." Crixton laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. "Oh yes, they learn tricks quickly enough, like trained pets. But do they truly understand civilization? I doubt most of them could even hold a proper conversation about history or culture." Danny felt anger building in his chest. He had heard comments like this before, but never in such a formal setting. The other guests were nodding along, treating the ambassador's words like harmless entertainment. But Danny could see the insult. For what it was, a deliberate attempt to make humans look bad in front of the Queen. "Take that guard there," Crixton continued, pointing directly at Danny. "I bet he doesn't even know the difference between the Third Galactic War and the Andromedan expansion. Probably thinks they were the same event." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Danny, who felt his heart pounding in his chest. He could stay quiet and let the insult pass, or he could speak up and risk making a scene. For a moment, he almost chose silence. Then he looked at Queen Viroleth. Her golden eyes were watching him intently, and he saw something there that gave him courage. She wasn't expecting him to stay quiet. She was waiting to see what he would do. Danny stepped forward slightly, his voice calm and respectful. "With respect, Ambassador Crixton, the Third Galactic War and the Andromedan expansion were separated by nearly 2 centuries. The war ended in 2847 when the Centauri Alliance signed the Treaty of Proxima. The Andromedan expansion didn't begin until 3024, after the discovery of the quantum tunnel networks." Crixton's yellow eyes narrowed. Any child could recite basic dates. "You're right," Danny said, still speaking in perfect Andromedan. "But perhaps the ambassador has forgotten that the expansion only succeeded because Andromedan forces used tactics borrowed from human military history. Specifically, the island-hopping strategy first used by Earth's Pacific Fleet in the 20th century. The room was completely silent now. Danny continued, his voice growing slightly stronger. The Andromedan victory at Kepler Station was particularly impressive since it followed the same principles that Admiral Chun used at the Battle of Europa. Of course, Admiral Chun was human, so perhaps that victory doesn't count as real civilization." Crixton's face had turned a darker shade of green. "You speak our language well for a primitive." "Thank you," Danny replied. "I also speak Zephyrian, Centauri, Vegan, and 2 dialects of Rigelian. I find that learning languages helps me better understand the rich cultures of our galaxy, even the ones that some people consider primitive." The ambassador tried to respond, but found himself completely outmaneuvered. Danny had not only corrected his historical errors, but had done so in flawless Andromedan while making subtle points about the value of human contributions to galactic civilization. And he had done it all without raising his voice or showing disrespect. Queen Viroleth was staring at Danny with undisguised amazement. In 5 minutes, this quiet human guard had accomplished what her diplomats had been trying to do for months. He had put Ambassador Crixton in his place without creating a diplomatic incident. The dinner continued, but the mood had shifted. The other aliens began asking Danny questions about human culture and history. He answered them all thoughtfully, showing knowledge that surprised everyone present. By the end of the evening, even the most skeptical guests were treating him with respect. After the dinner ended and the guests had left, Queen Viroleth asked Danny to stay behind. The dining hall was empty except for the 2 of them and a few servants clearing the tables. "Where did you learn to speak Andromedan so well?" she asked. Danny's nervousness returned now that they were alone. I studied it in school, Your Majesty. I've always been good with languages. And the historical knowledge? I read a lot, Danny said, looking down at his feet. I know it's not very exciting, but I like learning about different cultures. It helps me understand people better. Queen Violet walked closer to him, and Danny had to look up to meet her eyes. You have degrees, don't you? You're not just a simple guard. Danny's face turned red. I have a degree in xenobiology and another in cultural anthropology, but I'm not very good with people in real life. I can read about them, but talking to them is different. Yet you just faced down one of the most feared diplomats in the galaxy. That was different, Danny said quietly. He was being mean about humans. I couldn't just stand there and let him say those things. Queen Violet felt something strange in her chest. This human had been willing to risk his career and possibly his life to defend his species' honor. Not for glory or recognition, but simply because it was the right thing to do. Would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow? She asked suddenly. Not a formal dinner, just the two of us. I'd like to hear more about your studies. Danny's eyes went wide. You want to have dinner with me? Is that so surprising? You're the queen of half the galaxy? Danny stammered. I'm just a guard. I don't understand why you'd want to spend time with someone like me. Queen Violet smiled, and Danny noticed that her whole face changed when she did. The stern ruler disappeared, replaced by someone who looked almost lonely. Perhaps that's exactly why, she said softly. The next evening, Danny found himself in the Queen's private dining room. It was smaller than the Great Hall, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs. Queen Violet had changed out of her formal robes into a simple blue dress that made her look more approachable. Tell me about Earth, she said as they ate. What was it like growing up there? Danny talked about his childhood on one of Earth's agricultural colonies, about his parents who grew crops for the space stations, about the small school where he had first learned about alien cultures. The Queen listened intently, asking questions. That showed she was genuinely interested. You miss it, she observed. Sometimes, Danny admitted. But I like learning about new places too. This palace is amazing. The architecture is unlike anything humans have ever built. Most people who come here only see the power and the wealth, Queen Violet said. You're the first person to notice the architecture. As the evening went on, Danny found himself relaxing. The Queen was easier to talk to than he had expected. She was incredibly intelligent, but she didn't make him feel stupid. She seemed genuinely curious about his thoughts and opinions. Can I ask you something? Danny said as they finished their meal. Of course. Don't you get lonely? Being the Queen, I mean. It must be hard to have real conversations when everyone is trying to impress you or ask you for favors. Queen Violet was quiet for a long moment. Yes, she said finally. It is lonely, very lonely. Danny felt his heart ache for her. He had never thought about what it would be like to have that much responsibility, to always have to be strong and perfect for everyone else. Well, he said quietly, if you ever want to talk to someone who's not trying to impress you, I'm usually free after my shift ends. Queen Violet looked at him with those golden eyes, and Danny saw something there that made his breath catch. It was gratitude, but also something else. Something that made him feel warm and nervous at the same time. I'd like that very much, she said as Danny walked back to his quarters that night. He felt like everything had changed. The intimidating alien queen was still there, but now he had also seen the person behind the crown. And somehow that person wanted to spend time with him. He had no idea that Queen Violet was lying awake in her own chambers, thinking about the gentle human guard who had. Over the next 2 months, Danny and Queen Violet's evening dinners became a regular routine. What had started as a simple meal between two people had grown into something much deeper. Every night after Danny finished his guard duties, he would make his way to the Queen's private chambers where they would talk for hours about everything and nothing. Danny learned that Queen Violet loved old poetry from her homeworld, that she had a secret garden where she grew rare flowers, and that she often lay awake at night worrying about whether her decisions were right for her people. The Queen discovered that Danny wrote stories in his spare time, that he had traveled to 15 different planets before joining the military, and that he had a gift for seeing the good in people even when they couldn't see it themselves. The change in both of them was obvious to everyone in the palace. Danny walked with more confidence now, his shoulders straight and his voice steady when he spoke. He had stopped jumping at shadows and started offering helpful suggestions during security briefings. The other guards began to look to him for advice about dealing with alien customs and languages. Queen Viroleth seemed happier too. Her advisors noticed that she smiled more during council meetings and that she had started asking for human perspectives on trade agreements and diplomatic issues. She even began learning English, though she told everyone it was just to better understand Earth's culture. "You're teaching the Queen our language," Captain Hayes said to Danny one afternoon. "I've heard her practicing when she thinks no one is listening." Danny felt his face get warm. "She's very smart. She picks up new words quickly." "That's not what I meant, and you know it," Captain Hayes said with a knowing smile. "Just be careful. Martinez, palace politics can be dangerous, especially when feelings get involved." Danny knew she was right, but he couldn't help himself. Every evening with Queen Viroleth felt like a gift. She was brilliant and funny and kind in ways that most people never got to see. When she laughed at one of his stories, or when she asked his opinion about something important, Danny felt like he was exactly where he belonged. The Queen felt the same way. For the first time in her life, she had found someone who saw her as more than just a ruler. Danny never asked her for favors or tried to use their friendship for political gain. He simply enjoyed her company, and that was something she had never experienced before, but their growing closeness was not going unnoticed by everyone in the palace. Lord Commander Thane Voss, the Queen's military advisor, had been watching their friendship with increasing concern. Voss was a tall, imposing Zephyrian with dark blue skin and silver eyes. He had served the royal family for 20 years and had been hoping to marry Queen Viroleth for almost as long. "Your Majesty," Voss said during a private meeting, "I'm concerned about the influence this human guard is having on your decisions. Some of the nobles are starting to talk." Queen Viroleth's eyes flashed with annoyance. "Private Martinez is a valuable member of my staff. His insights have been helpful in several important matters." "Of course, Your Majesty. But perhaps it would be wise to limit his access to sensitive information. After all, his loyalty is ultimately to Earth, not to our empire." The Queen's voice turned cold. "Are you questioning my judgment, Commander?" "Never, Your Majesty. I'm simply concerned for your safety and the stability of the realm." But Voss wasn't just concerned. He was angry and jealous. He had spent years trying to win the Queen's attention, only to watch her give it freely to a human who had done nothing to earn it. In Voss's mind, Danny was a threat that needed to be eliminated. Meanwhile, Danny was completely unaware of the danger growing around him. He was too focused on his feelings for Queen Viroleth, feelings that he was trying desperately to hide. He knew that caring about her was foolish. She was royalty, and he was just a guard. But every time she smiled at him or touched his hand while they talked, his heart would race and he would forget all the reasons why their friendship was impossible. The breaking point came during the Festival of Twin Moons, the most important celebration in Zephyrian culture. The entire palace was decorated with silver and blue lights, and nobles from across the empire had come to attend the festivities. The highlight of the festival was the ceremonial dance, where the Queen would traditionally choose a partner to join her on the ballroom floor. Danny was working security during the festival, standing along the wall of the great ballroom with the other guards. The room was filled with hundreds of aliens in their finest clothes, all waiting to see who the Queen would choose for the dance. Queen Viroleth entered the ballroom wearing a gown that seemed to be made of starlight itself. The fabric shifted and shimmered as she moved, and her white hair was decorated with jewels that caught the light. She looked like something from a fairy tale, beautiful and otherworldly. The music began, and everyone in the room held their breath. Traditionally, the Queen would choose someone of high rank, usually a noble or a military officer. Lord Commander Voss stepped forward slightly, clearly expecting to be chosen. but Queen Violet's golden eyes scanned the room until they found Danny. Without hesitation, she walked directly to him and extended her hand. "Would you dance with me, Danny?" she asked, using his first name in front of everyone. The entire ballroom went silent. Danny felt like his heart had stopped. Everyone was staring at him, waiting to see what he would do. He could have said no, could have made some excuse about being on duty. But the way Queen Violet was looking at him, with hope and something that might have been love in her eyes, made it impossible to refuse. "I would be honored, Your Majesty," he said, taking her hand. The crowd parted as they walked to the center of the ballroom. Danny had never danced to Zephyrian music before, but Queen Violet guided him through the steps with gentle pressure from her hands. At first he was nervous and clumsy, but gradually he began to relax and let the music flow through him. What happened next surprised everyone, including Danny and the Queen. They began to move together as if they had been dancing for years. Danny's natural grace combined with Queen Violet's fluid movements created something beautiful and perfect. They spun and stepped in perfect harmony, their eyes locked on each other, completely lost in the moment. The crowd watched in amazement as the unlikely pair transformed the ancient ritual into something new and magical. Even the nobles who had been shocked by the Queen's choice found themselves mesmerized by the sight of the two dancers moving as one. When the music ended, Danny and Queen Violet stood in the center of the ballroom, still holding each other, both breathing hard from the dance. The crowd was completely silent, unsure how to react to what they had just witnessed. Then Queen Violet did something that shocked everyone even more. She leaned down and kissed Danny's forehead gently, a gesture of affection that left no doubt about her feelings for him. The crowd erupted in whispers and gasps. Some of the nobles looked scandalized, while others seemed curious about this development. But Lord Commander Voss looked furious, his silver eyes blazing with anger. "Perhaps we should step outside," Queen Violet whispered to Danny. They left the ballroom together, walking through the palace gardens under the light of the twin moons. The night air was cool and sweet, filled with the scent of alien flowers. "I'm sorry," Queen Violet said when they were alone. "I shouldn't have put you in that position. The nobles will talk about this for months." "I don't care about the nobles," Danny said, surprising himself with his boldness. "That was the most amazing thing I've ever done." Queen Violet stopped walking and turned to face him. "Danny, I need to tell you something. These past few months, getting to know you, spending time with you, it's changed me. You've changed me." Danny's heart was pounding. "You've changed me too. I never thought I could feel this way about anyone, especially someone like you." "Someone like me?" "Someone so incredible, so perfect, so far above someone like me." Queen Violet reached out and touched his face gently. "You're not below me, Danny. You're the first person who's ever made me feel like I'm more than just a queen. With you, I feel like I'm just ... me." They stood there in the moonlight, looking at each other with years of unspoken feelings finally out in the open. When Queen Violet leaned down to kiss him, Danny felt like his whole world was changing. The kiss was gentle and sweet, full of promise and hope. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "What happens now?" Danny asked. "I don't know," Queen Violet admitted, "but I want to find out." Neither of them noticed the figure, watching from the shadows. Lord Commander Voss had followed them into the garden, and his face was dark with rage. He had seen enough. The human had stolen what should have been his, and Voss was not going to let that stand. As Danny and Queen Violet walked back toward the palace, hand in hand, Voss was already planning his revenge. He would destroy the human guard and prove to the Queen that her feelings were a mistake. And if that meant bringing down the entire human race in the process, so be it. The festival continued around them, but everything had changed. Love had been declared under the twin moons, but danger was gathering in the shadows. The real test of Danny and Queen Violet's relationship was about to begin. The week after the Festival of Twin Moons felt like a dream to Danny. Queen Violet had made their relationship official by announcing that he would be joining her private council as a cultural advisor. This meant they could spend even more Time together without causing gossip among the palace staff. Danny's new position came with a larger room, better meals, and access to parts of the palace he had never seen before. But the best part was being able to see Queen Viroleth every day, without having to hide their feelings. She would smile at him during meetings, ask for his opinion on important matters, and sometimes brush his hand with hers when no one was looking. "You look happy," Captain Hayes told him one morning. "Happier than I've ever seen you." "I am happy," Danny said, unable to keep the grin off his face. "I never thought my life could be like this." "Just remember what I told you about palace politics," she warned. "Not everyone is happy about your promotion. Be careful who you trust." Danny nodded, but he wasn't really worried. Queen Viroleth was the most powerful person on the planet. Who would dare to cause trouble for them? The answer came 3 days later. Danny was in his new office, reading reports about trade agreements with Earth when 2 royal guards appeared at his door. But these weren't the friendly guards he worked with every day. These were members of the Internal Security Force, and they looked very serious. "Private Martinez," one of them said, "you need to come with us immediately." "What's wrong?" Danny asked, standing up quickly. "Has something happened to the Queen?" "Just come with us now." They escorted Danny through the palace hallways, but instead of taking him to Queen Viroleth's chambers, they led him to a part of the building he had never seen before. The walls here were plain stone, and the lights were dim. Danny realized, with growing fear, that they were taking him to the palace dungeons. "There's been a mistake," Danny said as they stopped in front of a heavy metal door. "I haven't done anything wrong." "That's not for us to decide," the guard replied, opening the door. "You'll stay here until the investigation is complete." The cell was small and cold, with only a narrow bed and a tiny window near the ceiling. Danny sat on the bed, his mind racing. What investigation? What was he supposed to have done? Hours passed before anyone came to see him. When the door finally opened, Lord Commander Voss walked in, followed by 2 other officers Danny didn't recognize. "Private Martinez," Voss said, his silver eyes cold and unfriendly. "Or should I say Spy Martinez?" "Spy?" Danny jumped to his feet. "What are you talking about? I'm not a spy." Voss smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. "We have evidence that suggests otherwise. Communications between you and certain individuals on Earth, plans to steal military secrets, information about our defense systems being sent to human intelligence agencies." Danny felt like the floor was falling out from under him. "That's impossible. I've never sent any information to Earth. Except letters to my family. You can check all my communications." "Oh, we have," Voss said. "And what we found was very interesting. Coded messages hidden in innocent-looking personal letters. Very clever." "You're lying," Danny said, his voice getting louder. "I would never betray Queen Viroleth or this empire. Never. The evidence says otherwise. And I'm afraid the Queen has no choice but to order a full investigation. You'll remain here until we get to the bottom of this." After Voss left, Danny sank onto the bed, his mind spinning. This had to be some kind of mistake, or maybe it was a test of some kind. Queen Viroleth would figure out the truth and come too. Get him. She knew him better than anyone. She would know he could never do something like this, but hours turned into days, and no one came except guards bringing him food. Danny asked about Queen Viroleth, but they wouldn't tell him anything. He asked to speak to Captain Hayes, but they said she was not allowed to see him. He felt completely alone and scared. Meanwhile, Queen Viroleth was dealing with the worst crisis of her reign. The evidence against Danny looked terrible. There were communication logs showing messages sent from his personal account to known human intelligence operatives. There were files on her computer system that had been accessed using Danny's security codes. There were even photographs of him in areas of the palace where he shouldn't have been. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty," Lord Commander Voss said during an emergency council meeting. "I know this is painful for you, but the evidence is clear. Martinez has been spying on us from the beginning." Queen Viroleth stared at the documents spread across the table. Everything looked real, but something felt wrong. She had spent months getting to know Danny. She had seen his genuine reactions to things, his honest emotions, his real feelings. Could she have been so completely fooled? "I want to speak with him," she said. "Your Majesty, that would not be wise. He's clearly a trained operative. He might try to manipulate you again. I said I want to speak with him." Queen Viroleth's voice filled the room with authority that made everyone shrink back. But when she went to the dungeons, Danny looked so broken and confused that her heart ached. He was sitting on the narrow bed, staring at the wall with empty eyes. When he saw her, he jumped up and rushed to the bars of his cell. "Viroleth," he said, using her first name without thinking. "Thank goodness you're here. There's been a terrible mistake. Someone is trying to frame me. I would never hurt you or your people. You have to believe me." Looking into his brown eyes, Queen Viroleth wanted desperately to believe him. But the evidence was so strong, and her advisors were all telling her the same thing. How could she trust her feelings over facts? "Denny," she said quietly, "they have proof, communications, files, security footage." "How do you explain that?" "I can't explain it because I didn't do it," Danny said, grabbing the bars. "Someone else did this and made it look like me. Please, you know me. You know I'm not capable of betraying you." Queen Viroleth felt tears in her eyes. "I thought I knew you. But maybe I only saw what you wanted me to see." The hurt in Danny's eyes was so deep that she almost changed her mind right there. But then she remembered her duty to her people, her responsibility as queen. She couldn't let her personal feelings put the entire empire at risk. "I'm sorry, Danny," she whispered. "The trial will be fair. If you're innocent, the truth will come out." As she walked away, Danny called after her, his voice breaking. "Viroleth, please, don't let them do this. I love you." Queen Viroleth stopped but didn't turn around. She wanted to run back to him, to throw open the cell door and tell him she believed him. But she was a queen first, and queens had to make hard choices. That night, Queen Viroleth lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling and trying not to cry. Part of her still believed in Danny's innocence, but the evidence was overwhelming. Had their entire relationship been a lie? Had he been playing her from the very beginning? In his cell, Danny wasn't sleeping either. He kept going over everything that had happened, trying to figure out who could have done this to him. Someone with access to his computer accounts, his security codes, his personal information. Someone who wanted to destroy his relationship with Queen Viroleth. Suddenly, Danny remembered something. A few weeks ago, he had noticed Lord Commander Voss asking the palace computer technicians about human security protocols. At the time, Danny had thought Voss was just being thorough about palace security. But now he wondered if there had been another reason Voss had the access he would need to plant false evidence. He had the authority to order investigations. And he had a clear motive. He wanted Queen Viroleth for himself. But even if Danny was right, he had no way to prove it from inside a prison cell. He could only hope that somehow, someway, the truth would come out before it was too late. The trial was set for the next week. If Danny was found guilty of espionage, the punishment would be death. And even if he was somehow proven innocent, the damage to his relationship with Queen Viroleth might be beyond repair. As Danny sat in his cold cell, he realized that losing his life might be easier than losing the woman he loved. But he wasn't ready to give up yet. Somehow, he had to find a way to prove his innocence and show Queen Viroleth that their love had been real. The question was whether he would get the chance before it was too late. The trial began on a cold morning exactly 1 week after Danny's arrest. The great courtroom was packed with nobles, diplomats, and military officers from across the empire. Everyone wanted to see what would happen to the human who had won the Queen's heart and then supposedly betrayed her trust. Danny sat in the defendant's chair, wearing simple prison clothes instead of his guard uniform. He looked thin and tired after a week in the dungeons, but his eyes were still alert. He kept looking at Queen Viroleth, who sat on her royal throne at the front of the courtroom. But she wouldn't meet his gaze. Lord Commander Voss presented the evidence against Danny with confidence. The communication logs, the security footage, the access files, everything pointed to Danny being a spy for Earth's intelligence services. The case seemed clear and simple. Members of the court, Voss said in his commanding voice. The evidence shows that Private Martinez has been working against our empire from the moment he arrived. He used his position as a guard, and later as the Queen's advisor, to steal our military secrets and send them back to Earth. Captain Hayes was called as a witness. She had been Danny's commanding officer and knew him better than most. But she seemed confused by the evidence. I never saw any signs that Martinez was disloyal, she testified. He always followed orders and seemed genuinely interested in serving the Empire. But the evidence is very strong. Danny's heart sank as he listened to the testimony. Even his friends seemed to believe he was guilty. How could he prove his innocence when everything looked so bad? Then something unexpected happened. A young palace technician named Ben Clark asked to speak to the court. He was a human who worked on the computer systems, and he looked very nervous as he approached the witness stand. "I've been working on the palace computers for 2 years, Ben said, his voice shaky. "I know how all the security systems work. And I found something strange about the evidence against Private Martinez." Lord Commander Voss stood up quickly. "This technician is not qualified to analyze complex security data." But the judge allowed Ben to continue. "The dates on the communication logs don't match the actual transmission records," Ben explained. "Someone changed the dates to make it look like Martinez sent those messages. And the security footage has been edited. I can prove it." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Queen Violet leaned forward, suddenly very interested. "Show us," she commanded. Ben connected his computer to the court's display system. On the big screen he showed the original security footage next to the edited version that had been presented as evidence. The differences were small, but they were there. "Someone with high-level access to our systems did this," Ben said. "Someone who knew how to change records and plant false evidence. It would take months of planning and very advanced computer skills." Danny felt hope rising in his chest for the first time in a week. Someone was finally listening to reason. But Lord Commander Voss wasn't finished. "Even if some evidence was tampered with, that doesn't prove Martinez is innocent. Perhaps he had help from other human agents." "Actually," Ben said, pulling up another screen, "I traced the source of the tampering. All the changes came from a single computer terminal in the military command center. The user logs show who was accessing that terminal during the times when the evidence was planted." Everyone in the courtroom held their breath as Ben highlighted the user information on the screen. The name that appeared made everyone gasp in shock. "Lord Commander Thane Voss." The courtroom exploded into chaos. Nobles shouted questions, guards reached for their weapons, and Voss himself turned white with rage. "This is impossible," Voss yelled. "The human is lying. This is all part of their plan." But Queen Violet was studying the evidence on the screen with cold, calculating eyes. "Explain this, Commander Voss," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "Your Majesty, they've obviously hacked our systems to frame me. This is exactly the kind of thing human spies would do when they're caught." Ben pulled up more data. "I also found financial records showing payments to several Earth-based organizations. The money came from Commander Voss's personal accounts. And there are communication logs showing he was in contact with a human extremist group that wants to start a war between our species." Danny stared at the screen in amazement. Voss hadn't just been trying to frame him. He had been working with humans who wanted to destroy the peace between Earth and the Zephyrian Empire. "You planned all of this?" Queen Violet said, standing up from her throne. "You wanted to make me believe that Danny had betrayed me. You wanted to destroy our relationship and start a war." Voss's face twisted with anger and desperation. "He doesn't deserve you. I've served your family for 20 years. I've loved you since we were children. And you throw it all away for some weak human who stumbled into your life by accident." "So you decided to destroy him," Queen Violet said. "And you were willing to start a war to do it." "Yes," Voss screamed, pulling out a weapon. "And I'll finish what I started." He aimed the energy blaster at Queen Violet, but Danny was already moving. Even though he was shackled and weak from his time in prison, he threw himself between Voss and the Queen. The energy blast hit Danny in the chest, sending him flying backward. He crashed to the floor and didn't move. "Denny!" Queen Violet screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. The blast had burned a hole through his shirt, and there was blood spreading across his chest. Palace guards tackled Voss and wrestled the weapon away from him. But Queen Violet only had eyes for Danny, who was barely breathing. "You're going to be okay," she whispered, pressing her hands against his wound to stop the bleeding. "I'm so sorry, Danny. I should have believed you. I should have trusted." "You?" Danny's eyes fluttered open, and he managed a weak smile. "It's okay," he whispered. "I understand why you couldn't. You had to protect your people. Don't talk. Save your strength. The medical team is coming." "Violet," Danny said, his voice getting weaker. "I need you to know. Everything I told you was real. My feelings for you, all of it, it was all real." Tears were streaming down Queen Violet's face. I know it was real, and I love you too, so much." The medical team arrived and rushed Danny to the palace hospital. Queen Violet stayed by his side through 3 surgeries and 2 days of uncertainty. She held his hand and talked to him even when the doctors said he couldn't hear her. When Danny finally woke up, the first thing he saw was Queen Violet's golden eyes looking down at him with relief and love. "You saved my life," she said softly. "You saved mine first," Danny replied, "when you gave me a chance to be more than just a scared guard." The recovery took months, but Danny slowly got stronger. During that time, the full extent of Voss's conspiracy was revealed. He had been working with human extremists who wanted to provoke a war between the species. They had planned to use Danny's trial and execution as an excuse to attack Zephyrian colonies. The revelation actually brought Earth and the Zephyrian Empire closer together. Both governments realized how easily they could have been manipulated into fighting each other. New cooperation agreements were signed, and Danny was offered a position as the first human ambassador to the Zephyrian court. But the biggest surprise came 6 months after the trial. Queen Violet called a special assembly of the royal court and made an announcement that shocked the entire galaxy. "I have decided to marry Danny Martinez," she declared. "He will become my husband and co-ruler of this empire." The nobles were stunned, but they had seen how Danny had risked his life for their queen. They had also seen how the crisis had brought their 2 species closer together. After much discussion, they agreed to support the union. The wedding was held a year later, with representatives from dozens of different species in attendance. Danny, who had once been too nervous to speak in front of a small group, stood before thousands of beings and pledged his love to Queen Vyrf as they danced their first dance as husband and wife. Danny thought about how much his life had changed. He was no longer the timid guard who had dropped his weapon on his first day. He was a confident leader who had helped prevent a war and brought 2 species together. But the most amazing thing wasn't his transformation. It was that Queen Violet, the most powerful being he had ever met, had chosen to love him just as he was. "What are you thinking about?" Queen Violet asked as they spun across the dance floor. "Just remembering the first time we danced," Danny said. "I was so scared I could barely stand up. And now?" Danny smiled up at his wife, his queen, his best friend. "Now I know that sometimes the most incredible things happen when you're brave enough to be yourself." Queen Violet kissed him gently, and the crowd cheered. Their love story had begun with a nervous guard and a lonely queen, but it had become something that would inspire beings across the galaxy for generations to come. In the end, what had shocked everyone the most wasn't that a proud alien queen had fallen in love with a timid human guard. It was that their love had been strong enough to change the entire galaxy for the better.